love me, but all my wisdom he parted. But oh, please at least answer me this. Answer me, what's the business? Yeah, don't take my life away, don't take my life away from a distance. Yeah, don't take my life away, don't take my life away. I'm a victim.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Trip Trap Talk Show. You probably couldn't have told or understood, but apparently that was a PSA about saving the bees.
I think it was pretty obvious, Sean.
I think it was pretty obvious from that sound. But yeah, this week we have special guest, Kristin Rebecca. Kristin, how are you doing?
I'm good. How about you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. I'm doing great. I'm sure these guys are as well.
Yep. Doing pretty darn decent.
Yeah, but Kristin is a traveling folk singer from Columbia, Maryland, which is pretty close to here. Did you always foresee yourself like traveling around, or?
I mean, that was the dream when I decided I wanted to do folk music. Initially, I actually got into music through Christian contemporary music through worship band at the church I went to in middle school.
Huh.
And I first thought maybe I'll be a worship leader or maybe I'll go into contemporary Christian music, but I decided no, I'd rather branch out into more mainstream.
So music has always been a part of your life, you would say?
Yeah, I mean, especially since I was in middle school.
Okay. Awesome.
Is that when you started playing the guitar first, right?
Yeah, I started playing guitar at the age of 12,
Okay.
and the inspiration came because of the youth band for the middle school. For confirmation specifically, the high schoolers would play, and I thought the bass player was really cute at age 12. I mean, I just thought he was so cute, first crush, and the guitar player stood right next to him, so I'm like, maybe I should take up the guitar. Now, he was older than me, he didn't know I existed, but my love of music grew from that point on.
So it's all because of a boy.
All because of a boy.
Hey, sometimes it takes that spark
Yeah.
to find something else.
Yeah, we had a friend who was the same way. He started playing guitar because he thought it would get him girls, and then he just ended up loving guitar.
Yeah.
And he still plays, and he's in a band as well. So did the crush inspired your musical taste? Does it inspire your music in general?
Basically, I moved on after that point, and he graduated and hopefully is doing well now.
You play bass, you know?
Yeah.
It always yields good results.
I would hope so.
In your last song that we just played, Wackos and Weirdos, you're talking about a bunch of different awkward, terrible situations with these guys. Is there any of them that really sticks out to you?
One specifically that happened around the time I was sort of editing this song was I got on a date with a guy I'd met, and we met at a Starbucks, just casual. He came in and spent 2 hours complaining about his day and his life and asked me absolutely nothing about myself. And then I did something I don't typically do, because he'd done this for 2 hours and he looked like he was going to continue for more. I told him I had to go because I had an appointment. I don't typically do that, but then he looked at me and said, "I had a great time. Do you want to do it again?" I just said, no.
You gotta bring up old Dr. Face.
Yeah.
So was he the weirdo in that song?
He's one of them, yeah.
Okay.
But if he played bass guitar, then he would be much less of a
Would that
weirdo,
change the
right?
stakes?
No. You spend 2 hours complaining, there's just not going to get another date.
Was there anything interesting in that whole 2 hours of him complaining, or was it just like
He
nothing?
didn't like his job, and my recommendation is maybe he should have looked for a new one.
Get a new job, man.
Yeah.
Well, your job as a professional musician, which is something that a lot of people, seek but are also afraid of doing. What made you take that leap?
I think to really do this job, you got to do it full time. Everyone from basically you're running before you get a team like a manager and an agent. You're doing all the roles. You're being a lawyer, you're being a manager, you're being an agent, you're being a publicist. You're doing all of that, and sometimes that can take 5 to 6 hours a day, and then you actually have to create art.
Yeah.
So it's really a full-time job. Right now, I'm lucky, though, as I've started transitioning to actually getting help. I have a PR company I work with called Cyber PR. I got my new album on the radio with the Planetary Group, and they've gotten over 100 stations playing it. So it's been nice to make that transition.
Yeah.
Sounds like things are starting to like really pick up.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Do you have any advice for people that are kind of in that limbo stage of whether they should go for it or not?
I think, just to be realistic about the challenge it brings, especially if you're like me, my family wasn't in music, so I have no connections starting out. Did it from just Google searching venues on up, and it's just going to be a lot of work, and there's going to be a lot of fear associated with it, like when is the next gig? When's the next pay? Is this going to work? Do people like what I do well enough for it to make a real solid living? And getting reactions from that and critiques. I saw a lot of teachers. All my albums have been recorded with Grammy winners or nominees, so they can give me feedback onto what that would sound like and be like.
How'd you get set up with those people?
Yeah.
Some of it was through knowing people. So my first harp teacher recommended me to work with Scott Schumann on my first EP, which was Fringe. And he had won a Grammy in the blues category. And it was a 6-track album, and that was a lot of fun. It was my first time in a real studio, and that took, over a year to make, I believe, for that one, just getting me used to it. And then 2 or 3 years later, I came out with a Celtic harp and voice album called Where Fairies Dwell, and again, through another harp person, I met Heidi Gerber, who was a Grammy nominee. And she's really good in that category, just knowing the feel of what people like and want to listen to. And then Charlie Piltzer, who works for Tonal Tacoma, he's a Grammy-winning engineer. I'd heard about him through someone else. And initially I'd reached out to work with him on my second album, but it's just time constraints of when I needed it done by. That one I actually had a deadline I needed it by. And he was busy, and so I approached him again because he's like the guy you go to for modern folk music. And so we discussed what I wanted, what my goals were, and it came out the way it did, and I love it.
So it seems like there's a lot of networking to really get to this point. So what advice would you give to people who are just starting out and want to get to like this point where you're seeing a lot of more attention and more success?
It's always about pushing forward and networking and meeting people. It's not about not being shy. And I'm actually a pretty introverted person. So it was a real hurdle for me to overcome, to be able to break out of that, pick up the phone of someone I've never met, never talked to, and been like, hi, I'm Kristin. Would you be willing to work with me? Would you be willing to let me play at your venue? It's a little scary at first, I'm going to be honest. I was shaking when I did my first phone call.
I bet it's a lot of anxiety, like really getting over that hurdle, that mental block, I guess, of trying to say, like, putting yourself out there. I can't put myself out there, right?
Yeah, and you get some, you always are going to find people who don't want what you do, but then I found a lot of people who do, and that's what gets you moving forward. And even I've found connections through people I wouldn't have expected. Like, I was able to get coaching from someone who worked with a music management company, because I house sat for somebody and their neighbor knew somebody. Yeah.
Wow.
It's always those little things.
Yeah.
Does that, like, introversion and anxiety affect your performances at all?
Not anymore. It used to. I was a very shy singer, and I was lucky between my parents and my teachers that they just kept pushing me and encouraging me to keep going forward with it.
That's awesome that you have like that support system.
Yeah.
So like what were like kind of like your first shows like then? How your performances changed?
For voice or music in general?
Just music in general. Overall.
Music in general, it was the youth band that the bass player played in. So when he left, that was about the time I actually got to come into it. I was ready to perform. And I did worship bands for 10 years, so from the time I was 12 to about 22.
Oh, wow.
And I was in different forms and different age levels. I did middle school, I did high school, and then I went back and did elementary school. But also during that time, I did solo work, I did private performance work, and then I worked with a Celtic band, local Celtic band named Painted Trillium.
Wow. Sounds like you got a wide breadth of experience that's like really working in your favor.
Yeah.
Is there much of a Celtic scene around here?
There is. It's a lot of where we played, though, because the other musicians in it actually now have come down to my mom and dad. It was much bigger. When I first entered into it, there were several other musicians, and then one moved away to Oregon, I believe it is. One got married, and one's wife, he was spending a lot of time at work for a big project he was doing, and she's like, I would like to see you. So it became just us. But we played a lot of time at the Maryland Renaissance Festival.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we've played a lot of other places, just small festivals in the area, concert series, private events, things like that.
You went to Ireland, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah. Did that, were you already like playing and listening to Celtic music before that?
Yes. Yeah, I had started about when I was 15, and I went to Ireland about 10 years later.
Okay. So how does the Celtic music there compare to what you guys are recreating over here?
It's gotten a lot more modern, at least where we were in Ireland. I mean, trad still definitely exists, and people still honor the traditions, and I think it's really important too, because it keeps the memory of history alive. But there you'll find a lot more of a rock scene in the local pubs than we expected when we first went in there.
Yeah, I was actually at a Irish rock concert when I was in San Francisco. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think the niece of my dad's friend was in this rock band that was playing at a block party on St. Paddy's Day, which is, of course, the perfect day to listen to Irish rock. And I was, like, pleasantly surprised. I had literally had no expectations whatsoever. You know, I'm a typical guy listening to hip-hop, rock, whatever. But these, I mean, it was cool how they had it had that, like, Irish, I don't know, not twang, but...
I like the energy.
Like, it had the energy, it had the accent, and it had the instruments.
Yeah,
and
it's
kind of...
I feel like it always has the instruments.
Yeah, but, like, that crossover between, like, traditional Celtic... and rock is neat. Would you say your Celtic music is more traditional or more towards like mixing with other genres?
Definitely trad, what I play, very traditional. I mean, as a group, we put a bit of a spin on it, but it honors more the traditional side than the rock side. And none of us really play the instruments, I think, that would qualify us as rock and roll.
What are like elements of traditional Celtic music?
Sometimes it's instrumentation. The Celtic harp is very old. It's one of the most oldest instruments there is, and there also is the hammered dulcimer, which is used in Celtic music now. The Irish bouzouki. Obviously, guitar is popular, and fiddle, which really didn't come around until the 1800s, but it's associated with it.
What is the Irish bouzouki?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's gonna be a hard one for me to explain.
I guess like trying to audibly describe it.
Yeah. In a sense, it's kind of like a guitar.
Okay.
It has more strings, though it has paired strings up, and then the body of it is more, I want to say teardrop is kind of the wrong way of explaining it, but similar to that.
Is it kind of like, I want to say a sitar, but like the neck's like fatter?
Actually, it's thinner. I would say
Thinner?
sitar.
Oh, okay.
Sitar's bigger.
Okay. My mistake.
Are you able to play the Irish bazooka?
No. My dad can though.
Oh.
Was he who got you into Irish music?
Actually, the music worked the other way around. My parents played when they were younger, but I didn't have a ton of interest in it in elementary school, so my parents were supportive in whatever I wanted to pursue. If I wanted to do karate, they supported it, horseback riding, dancing, and I didn't get into music till middle school. And then when I said I wanted to play guitar, my dad was like, well, maybe, I want to pick it up too. He played bass when he was younger.
Cool.
And he started playing it with me, and then he really loved it. My mom had always wanted to play hammered dulcimer, so she rented one and then bought one because she got into it.
Wow, so your family became musical because of you.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Wow. I have a question about one of your live performances.
Yeah.
It was one of your songs, Horseshoe?
Oh, Horseshoe, yes.
Yeah. What went into writing that song? Because you said you wrote it over someone who was hung on accident.
Yes. I mean, they purposefully hung him, but he was innocent.
Right.
Yeah. So I went to Tombstone, Arizona years ago. And I don't know if you've never been there, you learn really fast where the name comes from, is that the big Western battles happen there. And so there's a lot of tombstones. And sort of for a morbid entertainment, you go and tour the different graveyards there. And they got really creative with their epitaphs. Like one of them reads, "Killed because of the color of his shirt."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And the story behind that is he walked into the saloon, the bar one day, and he was wearing a purple shirt, and purple was not a manly color at that point, and he was teased for it, and he said, well, let's take it outside, and then he lost. They have another one there that says, "Here lies less more, shot 4 times by a 44, no less, no more." And then they have the tombstone that inspired the song I wrote, which says, "Here lies George Johnson, hung by mistake. He was right and we was wrong. We strung him up and now he's gone." And then they actually put a horseshoe down by the bottom where his head would be. And at that point I was like, this isn't lucky for anybody. It's not lucky for him. It's not lucky for the horse, you know. And I did a little reading up on George, and it turns out he got accused of stealing a horse, and back then that was a hanging offense. And he had bought the horse not realizing it was stolen, but he got convicted of stealing the horse, period. And a few days later, they caught the guy who actually had stolen the horse, and by that time, George was dead. So there was nothing they could really do, obviously.
Kind of reminds me of, like, buying a used car and finding out it's stolen.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like the same situation.
Yeah.
Except you can't get hanged for it anymore.
Yeah.
No, but you can go and get fined till basically you don't want to pay anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, true. So we're at the 20-minute break. We're going to play Blame It on the Moon. So here it is.
Gonna blame it on the moon. Didn't want to fall in love again so soon. I was fine, feeling strong. Didn't want to fall in love with anyone. Now that it's gone too far to call for old, I'll blame it on the moon, 'cause it's not my fault. I didn't think that this would happen so soon, so I'll blame it on the moon. I was happy to be free. Didn't think I'd give myself so easily. Guilty feelings in the night as I wonder, is it wrong to feel so right? Now that it's gone too far to call for old, I'll blame it on the moon, 'cause it's not my fault. I didn't think that this would happen so soon, so I'll blame it on the moon. Now that it's gone too far to call for old, I'll blame it on the moon, 'cause it's not my fault. I didn't think that this would happen so soon, so I'll blame it on the moon. So I'll blame it on the moon.
That was Blame It on the Moon by Kristin Rebecca off her album Tales, Trials, and Truths. You want to tell us a little bit about that song?
Sure. So that was one of the songs I didn't write. It's a cover by a British artist named Katie Melua, and I ran across it completely by accident. I don't know if you know Artscape, the big festival in Baltimore every year.
Lots of the whole city street, bro.
I've played there.
Weekend. Yep.
Yeah, I've played there a couple years, and they usually have themes associated with it. And they say, you're more likely to get hired if you will tailor your show around the theme. So when I signed up, they said, this year's theme is outer space. And I said, sure, I can find folk music that has to do with space. Why not? And I submitted it. And then I got the email that said, you've been hired. So that means I had to scramble around and figure out what I could do that had to do with outer space. Like, I've ran across Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star a lot. And I ended up going to this music conference where I heard a woman discuss her new album. And it sounded like she had said that she had heard that Pete Seeger's brother had did a song that I had interpreted as Blame It on the Moon, is what I thought it was called. And so I went tearing around trying to find this song by him, thinking it has moon in it, moon is space, that's close enough. And I couldn't find it by him, but then I ran across what I thought was someone doing a cover of his song, which was Katie Melua, and listened to it and liked it. And I realized that actually I had misheard the title. His was Shame on the Moon. But when I listened to that, I didn't like it as well, and I loved hers because it's really a song about getting into a bad relationship and blaming it on the circumstances. You're not blaming yourself. You're going to do it. You know it's wrong. You'd just rather blame it on anything, including the moon.
Wow.
Seems like you're very into the message of your songs or whatever you're covering. What is a cover that's really spoken to you that you're thinking of doing in the coming future?
You mean outside of the album?
Outside of the album, yeah.
So I've done a couple covers that I like on YouTube, where I did one by John Denver called Country Roads, which I love, just the idea of traveling on the country roads. There's one I'm doing coming up by a group called Kaylee Rain. They are a Celtic rock folk fusion band, and they're really good, and they did a song called You Than Me Than You Than Me. And it's all about being willing to put other people ahead of you and how much nicer the world would be if we all did that.
And it would.
I definitely agree on that one. Spread the love. So I saw on YouTube that you made a Tiny Desk contest entry.
Yeah, I did.
Did you ever hear back from them?
I did not. I even watched every week to see if I got into like the picks, and mine didn't get chosen, sadly.
Yeah. Tiny Desk is definitely a cool show. We watch it, definitely. It's basically on NPR. They have a desk, and they just have hit artists play, a small set. Everyone from like Tyler the Creator to Blue Man Group to a bunch of people that I've never heard of, but then get to check out.
You said it's called Tiny Desk?
Tiny Desk concert. Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
Is there any like dream show or dream performance that you'd like to get onto?
In terms of like shows like Tiny Desk?
Tiny Desk or something like a big like a huge festival, or...
I mean, I'm one of those people that I would love to play First Mariner Arena if I could do it.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah, that would be cool.
What's one of like the best venues you think you've played?
They're all so different in the way they are, but I will say that one thing I really love when you do the festivals is the camaraderie among the musicians. Everywhere I've found, from when I did the Philadelphia Folk Festival last year to doing Maryland Renaissance Festival, you all have sort of the same goals and loves, so you support each other heavily backstage and in front.
What would be, if you do have one, your worst venue?
I've
or
actually
they've all
been
been generally good to
yeah,
you?
I've been lucky that way.
Are there ever like situations where the musicians are like kind of against each other, or like maybe think that the success of someone else will lead to like a lack of their success?
Like a battle of the bands.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually hear that getting talked about a lot in the conferences. I haven't seen too much of that. I mean, occasionally you get people, but sometimes you just wonder if it's a personality thing anyways. Like, it's not you specifically, it's just the way they kind of are. But one thing I hear a lot about in conferences is remember that when one rises, we all rise together, specifically is what Ellis Paul said at NERFA.
And these conferences, like, can you mind going into those?
Yeah. I've been to a couple. So the NERFA is and SURFA are mainly for folk, part of the Folk Alliance is what they are, and they're different chapters in different areas. So they have like a Midwest one, they have one in the Northeast, they have one in the Southeast, and it's for a bunch of folk musicians descend upon a conference building, and they run different classes on like how to promote yourself. What should your website look like? If you're going to send out to radio, remember to have a spine on your CD, because if they can't see your name or the title, it's less likely to be played. So you learn different tips and tricks you might not know, and you can network too.
I didn't know there was a whole alliance for this.
Yeah.
Like, how did you even get to hearing about this?
It was through networking. I did a show, and the guy who ran the venue, it was at the Electric Maid in Tacoma Park. He asked me during sound check, he's like, "Are you going to go to NERFA this year?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is." And he told me, and so it looked like interesting, so I decided to go.
You said earlier that you like dance. What appeals you so much about dance? Is there any specific kind of dances that you like especially?
So I did ballroom just to actually sort of be social in college for 5 years, and then my dance partner, who is also an engineer.
Creative minds.
Yep. He came to me one time about our 5th year together, and he said, "So I got a job." He graduated college and he got a job. I said, "That's great." He said, "It's 2 hours away from where we're meeting."
Oh.
And I said, so commute's going to be long for you, or is this going to be the end of our partnership? And of course it ended up ending. And and a lot of the main people who had come had started drifting apart, and then I got busy, so I don't do it the way I used to.
Who is CLC?
CLC, the K-pop group.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, that's how I know them. I don't know if that actually stands for anything. I'm unfortunately, but they are a K-pop group. One of the ones I like listening to. They came out with a song called Black Dress, and I found the intro to it very interesting with the beats they have woven together and the way they've mixed spoken and song.
Nice. How'd you get into K-pop? Because that's
that's pretty
very
far away from
different
folk.
I go around and try to hit up different music from different parts of the world, because I think you can learn a lot as an artist by listening and getting ideas, and not just saying like that. For example, if you listen to the song Black Dress, you hear the beat and then one of them just says black, and then you hear beat and then one of them says black again, and they go into singing, and you find that catches you, and you're like, I don't want to copy them, but how would you get inspiration and do that for something you're doing to catch an audience?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If you only listen to like one thing all your life, then the music you produce is going to sound like that one thing.
Yeah.
You listen to like a whole bunch of stuff coming from everywhere,
Yeah,
you're going to have your own sound.
exactly, yeah.
So do you see yourself taking like a lot of elements from different genres of music when you're making music?
I would say so. Yeah, and the session musicians I work with, we're very, very good that way. Like I have a song called In Your Eyes, which has a more jazz feel to it, and we have elements of rock or more acoustic, but we wanted to keep it definitely more commercial, simply for getting a larger fan base.
Of course. Okay.
In one of your interviews, you said you were talking about Night in Santa Monica. What's that song about?
So Night in Santa Monica was initially titled A Night in Atlantic City. I had written it as an attempt to win the New Jersey folk songwriting contest. And the idea is once you won, you get a spot in their folk festival. And they said you're more likely to win if you write a song about New Jersey. So my New Jerseyan knowledge is very limited. I've been there maybe once or twice to play shows. And I looked up just info about it online, and I said, well, I know Atlantic City. People recognize it as a place, and I wrote this whole song around it, and I submitted it. And eventually I got a letter back saying, you didn't win. And I took the song. I was like, I don't like throwing away a song I wrote. I'm like, you write it, you should do something with it. And I took it to my co-producer, Charlie, and I said, what do you think? And he looked it over, and he's like, I like this. He said, but could you pick a more romantic city than Atlantic City to write about?
That's true.
Yeah.
And so I started matching up syllables, and Santa Monica worked.
Do you enter a lot of these contests?
No, just occasionally on a whim. Sometimes I also find it helps creatively, that if you're sort of forced to write about some topic, it sort of gets you working outside of a zone you normally would be.
Do these contests happen like very often, or?
Yeah, there's usually at least one going around the country at all times.
Okay.
Are there any places that really mean things to you in terms of putting those places into your music? Obviously, Atlantic City doesn't really mean too much to you, but is there like the opposite of that?
I mean, well, so the Fairies album definitely inspired by Ireland, because that was just a magical trip. In terms of other places, I mean, I grew up in Maryland. Most of my family lives in Minnesota. So far, they haven't ended up in a song, but doesn't mean they won't someday.
So how are you like able to grasp, because you said like that whole album was about Ireland, like how are you able to like grasp that inspiration that you've gotten from Ireland and like put it into your music?
So for the Fairies album, one thing you find out about Ireland when you visit is there's a lot of folklore there, a lot of deep history and folklore around fairies. And you'll see that when you go to the different sites. They'll have some sort of magical being that potentially lived there. And these are not good fairies. These are not like Disney fairies. These are fairies that will kidnap you, take you away, and you're never seen again type of fairies.
Oh, the troublemakers.
Yeah, troublemakers. And there's a story about Newgrange. I don't know if you know that. It's this giant sort of tomb, portal tomb it's called. And it had gotten grown over by grass. And so there'd only been sort of legends behind it. And one guy said, I want you to dig there to get the rock. And the workers didn't want to do it because there was all these ideas that if you messed with it, bad stuff's going to happen to you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But he forced them, and they chipped away, and they came across the stones that had been grown over, which are these stones that had been carved patterns into them by the people who had been there, ancient long ago. And they got so freaked out they dropped their tools and ran. So that's where it came from, was just getting an idea of what would it be like if you were hanging out around fairies.
Are those like magical fairies anything like the fairies at the fairy festivals?
I think those fairies are way nicer fairies.
What is a fairy festival?
A fairy festival and sort of like a fantasy festival, but so Festival of Legends, which I'm doing next weekend, is much more fantasy. They have fairies, they have people who follow all types of myth and folklore. The fairy festivals are more centered around your version of fairies or mermaids.
Okay.
They're all very family friendly, though.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah.
I've never thought of a fairy as evil.
Until they kidnap you and you never see your family again. That's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
How'd you get like interested in fairies? Did you like read at all, or just mythical creatures in general? Because I know I love like fantasy books, like Lord of the Rings, Narnia.
Same. I'm a big fantasy reader. I just grew up on fantasy, and so it just kind of stuck with me.
Who is Rich Mullins, and how did he inspire your music?
So Rich Mullins was one of the first, I would say, almost he bended genres, but he probably call him contemporary folk. And big inspiration for me is he was a hammered dulcimer player, and he would use that in commercial sort of folk music. He was also a Christian artist before he ended up dying early from getting a car accident. But he was a big inspiration because it showed me that you could take an unusual instrument like a harp, a hammered dulcimer, something you wouldn't necessarily hear every day, and incorporate it into commercial music.
Can you get people to like rock with like a harp or like anything like that?
I think so, especially it depends on what instrumentation you have around it. If you put a heavy drum around it, then people hear the beat and they start bobbing away to it, so to speak.
Yeah. It's definitely like a bit of a different vibe from what people imagine harps are like. It's this very
elegant,
yeah.
Elegant and light type of instrument. Yeah.
How'd you get into playing the harp?
So I did not grow up on harp music. I didn't really know anything about the harp, but like I said, I had some family in Minnesota, and they have a big music store there called Growth Music. And they sell all kinds of instruments you just don't see in most music stores here. And they actually have Celtic harps on display, which is different from the giant ones most people picture. They're the original harp. And I walked over to it, and I went and plucked a string. I was like, I want to play that. I didn't even know what it was at the time. I just wanted to play one. And so I went and told my parents at 15, and they rented me my first harp because your going rate for a new Celtic harp is $2,000.
Ooh,
wow.
Yeah.
Serious cash.
Yeah, so you're going to be invested if you're going to buy one.
Yeah, I'm guessing you own one now.
I own 3.
Oh,
wow.
Oh my goodness. Is that hard to like carry around for?
No, they're 14 pounds.
They're 14.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Really?
They're only 14
Yeah.
pounds?
They look so much heavier.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the big ones you're thinking of. They need wheels, like the ones for orchestras. You'll never see a Celtic harp in an orchestra.
Alright.
So is it like just a little thing you hold in your hands?
It's maybe about, I know people can't see who are listening, but, maybe about 4 feet,
4 feet?
I want to say.
Like a little bit taller than a chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man.
Speaking of instruments, can you tell us a little bit about the guitar that you brought with you?
Yeah, I brought, it used to be just purely acoustic until I had them put in electric.
Oh, it's acoustic
Yeah.
electric. Nice.
Yeah. And I found it's a Northwood, which is not a brand I've owned up until last year. I based very much a Taylor girl, typically. But I went to Nashville it was sort of a break on a tour I was doing. We had a break day. And so we went there, and I went to Carter's, which is the one-stop shop, pretty much, if you want to go see instruments. And I was looking through the guitars, and that one sort of called to me, so to speak, and I just couldn't put it down. And the idea of leaving Nashville without it was something I just couldn't do.
So we're gonna play "Ready for the Storm," and then shortly after that, we'll have a live performance in house. So look forward to that.
All the waves crashing, the tide rolls out. It's an angry sea, but there's no doubt that the lighthouse will keep shining out to warn the lonely sailors. And the lightning strikes and the
We're good. All right, so I'm going to do a live performance right now of a song I wrote off my new album called The Heartbeat of Life. Waking up to the mundane, every day it's the same. Same route, same routine, passing by, saying hi. No one looks my way, nothing seems to ever change. The pulse is in the steps we take. Lower breeze by the differences we make. I come alive when I realize we're the heartbeat of life, heartbeat of life, the heartbeat of life. Color starts to fill the gray, waking from my trance today. New path, new purpose, ready to go. I'm aglow, looking around me, endless possibilities. The pulse is in the steps we take. Lower breeze by the differences we make. I come alive when I realize we're the heartbeat of life, heartbeat of life, the heartbeat of life. When my life seems frozen, others passing me by, feeling trapped in the day-to-day. I remember, the pulse is in the steps we take. Lower breeze by the differences we make. I come alive when I realize we're the heartbeat of life, heartbeat of life, the heartbeat of life. We're the heartbeat of life, heartbeat of life, the heartbeat of life. We're the heartbeat of life, the heartbeat of life, the heartbeat of life. We're the heartbeat of life, heartbeat of life, the heartbeat of life. We're the heartbeat of life. The next song is actually one we talked about earlier, and it's called Night in Santa Monica. The summer I left home, a picture-perfect memory. Every day spent falling in love, 3 months full of young romance. The moon
That was Kristin Rebecca
What a
with
performance.
The Night in Santa Monica. I gotta say, that song would not remind me of Atlantic City at all. But yeah, is that about a specific night or just kind of a fantasy?
You kind of pull a little bit from experiences you've had. So, sorry, I nearly went over. So young love, early love, and sort of beginnings of getting to know what relationships are.
Oh yeah. Definitely reminded me of like a, of a teen romance novel a little bit. So you got started doing worship bands. Does religion still play a part in your music?
Not in my music. My life, but not my music.
Is that like, have you ever thought about doing, continuing to do religious music? Or what got you kind of away from that?
It was just more of a directional kind of thing. I just decided that I'd rather just do music that would be seen as more mainstream, more commercial. And I liked just going out and being able to just work the venues there and things like that. I found it just fun was where I fit in the best. As for writing, I'm always open to writing for any style, any genre. I have ideas popping around for all types of genres that I wouldn't necessarily sing myself, but I'd love to sell someday.
Okay. Do you ever write for other people, or is it just for yourself?
Right now it's just for me, but I have songs because I would like to get a publishing deal, which is something I'm sort of working towards hopefully this year. Just sort of reaching out to people to get to that stage where I would like to sell. I sort of have a little catalog of things where I'm working on where I'm like, this wouldn't be good for me, but it might be good for pop, or it might be good for country, like hardcore country, things like that.
Cool. So you're like steadily starting to build yourself and build your brand.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Do you just want to continue writing music, or would you ever go into books or poems or?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because books are hopefully in the future after the music thing is definitely concrete, is something I'd like to do. My mom and I have discussed doing a couple series of children's books we would like to publish at some point, including one that's based on a true story of a family member of ours.
Wow, use that as a springboard to, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does your mom write?
Well, both my parents get paid to do puppeteering, and they write their own scripts.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, they do a puppet show at the Maryland Renaissance Festival, and every year Calvin, the castle keeper, gets to keep Sir Nasty away from taking over the kingdom.
Have you ever participated in these puppet shows?
No, not at the Maryland one. Puppets just aren't my thing, but I love watching my parents do it.
Oh, that's cool. That must be nice.
A very creative family.
I like to think so.
What's your favorite book? I can tell you love books from talking to you, and also on your cover you're literally surrounded by books here. Yeah, well, the cover idea, so Sean Shiite, who I worked with, and he did my promo shoot before then too, amazing Baltimore-based photographer. I told him, because we talked about how a lot of my songs are story-based and are about true stories, and we got the idea of books because books also tell stories. But my favorite book, unfortunately, is not the one I'm reading right now. But there was a book before I found interesting. It was my first time in a long time delving into suspense, called What the Dead Want, and I really liked the beginning of the book. The middle became a little I felt like she could have spent a little more time there, but overall I liked the feel of the book. So what do the dead want? The dead didn't want to be ghosts anymore. Oh man. Would you want to be a ghost if you passed away, or would you just want to go, skip that whole process? I wouldn't want to stick around. I mean, sort of sticking around and watching things, but not being able to interact would be rough. I want to stick around a little bit, just to scare someone, mess with people, knock a book. Mess with people a little bit. Yeah. I don't know. I'd be curious. I mean, isn't TV basically just doing that?